They say love is blind. But what they never tell you is how dangerous that blindness can become when it's paired with faith, sacrifice, and silence. I was the woman everyone overlooked. Quiet, efficient, almost forgettable. The kind who brought lunch in glass containers with the labels scraped off. The one who never joined after-work drinks. Who wore the same muted beige cardigan 3 times a week and smiled politely without ever saying too much. At Cedarside Health Center in Boston, I was known as Savannah from billing. Just that. Not Savannah Reed, daughter of Richard Reed, founder of Reed Global Holdings. Not the girl with the platinum family name, the silent trust fund, or the keys to 3 penthouses on 3 coasts. I gave that all up for a man. A man I believed loved me for me. His name was Elijah Carter. And when I first met him, he didn't just light up the room. He warmed something inside me I didn't know had grown cold. He had the look of someone who could command a crowd without raising his voice. His laugh wasn't loud, but it lingered. Charming, thoughtful, like the last note of a cello. I met him on a rain-slick morning volunteering at a mobile clinic in Cambridge. I dropped a box of supplies. He caught it before it hit the pavement. Our hands brushed. Our eyes met. I know it sounds like something out of a bad movie, but some bad movies have tragic endings because they begin with the kind of hope you never see coming. Elijah was a second-year med student at Harvard. Polished, ambitious, grounded, or so I thought. He said he came from modest beginnings. A scholarship kid, raised by a single mother in Detroit, working 2 part-time jobs to make it through school. I admired that. It mirrored what I pretended to be. Ordinary, striving, real. I thought I had found someone who wouldn't care about my last name, who'd never worship my bank account more than my heart. So I tested it. I moved out of my family's Beacon Hill brownstone and into a rent-controlled walk-up in Jamaica Plain. The kitchen light flickered when the fridge kicked on. The water pipes rattled like ghosts whenever I turned on the shower. But it felt authentic, like I was earning something real. That apartment, peeling paint and all, became the stage where I'd test whether love could survive on sacrifice, not status. After 3 months of dating, I started helping with his expenses. It was subtle at first, paying for his textbooks, picking up the groceries, covering his half of the rent when he said his hours were cut at the tutoring center. But it grew. Each term, I wired him $5,200 for tuition. Then I started paying for everything. The gas in his car, his exam prep courses, even his gym membership because stress relief is important for future doctors. I did it without hesitation, without receipts, without expectations. Because when you believe someone is your forever, you don't keep score. You invest. I lived on a humble $52,000 salary that was actually a shell deposit my family funneled through a dummy admin job to make the story seem real. Every Friday night, I left that admin desk, took the T to the underground garage of the Elliott Hotel, where a navy blue Jaguar F-Pace awaited. In the bathroom of that hotel, I'd change into my real clothes, tailored wool coats, silk scarves, leather gloves. Then, I'd drive west to a gated estate in Chestnut Hill, where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked private gardens, and my name was still etched into the security system. No one knew. Not Elijah, not my co-workers, not even my therapist. I lived 2 lives, Savannah the girl next door, and Savannah the legacy. I told myself it was noble, that if Elijah passed the test, I'd reveal everything, that we'd laugh about it one day, champagne in hand, him shocked but proud that he loved me even when I had nothing. But secrets have a weight, and lies. No, matter how well-intentioned, rot quietly beneath your ribs. My father, Richard Reed, knew. He called it a dangerous fairy tale. When I visited him once at the firm's headquarters, still smelling faintly of cafeteria soup, he poured a scotch and said, "You're not Cinderella, and this isn't a fairy tale. This is a business deal you're dressing up as love." Didn't believe him. I was in love. Deeply, unshakably. I defended Elijah to everyone, even when he forgot our anniversary because of cardio review group, or when he bought himself a Fossil watch and told me it was a knockoff gift from a classmate. I wasn't naive. I just needed the truth to be different. But what if the truth was never hidden? What if I had simply refused to see it? The night I first suspected something real was wrong, I was cooking Elijah's favorite dinner, seared scallops with herbed butter and lemon risotto. He was late. Not unusual. But the text felt off. Too clean. Too scripted. Running late. Sorry, babe. Group project ran over. Be home soon. There were no typos. Elijah always had typos when he texted me from study group, because he always typed in a rush. That night he was perfect. He came home at 10:41 p.m. His hair was damp, not from the rain, but from a shower I didn't run. He kissed the top of my head like nothing was different. But there was a scent on his collar. Expensive, floral, definitely not mine. I stood, frozen as he peeled off his coat, and walked straight to the bathroom. I wanted to believe I was imagining it, that I was tired, that med school was hard, that maybe the perfume came from a classmate in a lab. But something broke in me that night. A small crack, a quiet shift. I didn't cry. I didn't confront him. I just started watching. Every detail. Every inconsistency. Every whispered phone call he took on the balcony when he thought I was asleep. What made it worse was this. He still told me he loved me. Still kissed my forehead each morning. Still laughed at my jokes. Still texted goodnight when he was studying late. If he were cruel, I could have walked away. But he wasn't. He was performing. Like a con artist who'd mastered the script of devotion. And the more I saw, the less I recognized the man I had built my entire life around. You see, love can be tender. But betrayal, it's surgical. It slices without warning, and you don't feel the bleed until it's far too late. And I wasn't even close to discovering how deep the cut would go. Before I tell you what happened next, the unraveling, the confrontation, the twist no one expected, I need you to understand something. Never wanted revenge. I wanted the truth, but once you have it, you can never go back. If this story has gripped you so far, and you want to know how it ends, what he did, what I did, please consider subscribing to this channel. Your support helps us bring more real, emotional, and powerful stories to life. Now, here's a quick question for you. Comment your answer below. If someone you love asked you to hide your real identity to prove your love, would you do it? A. Yes. True love should be tested. B. No. Real love accepts the full truth from the start. Type your answer in the comments. A or B. There's a particular kind of silence that settles into a relationship when love begins to decay. Not loud, not violent, just a slow, sinking quiet. It hums beneath the surface, like a current you try to ignore because admitting it means everything you believed is unraveling. That silence had started to fill the small apartment I shared with Elijah Carter. He didn't change all at once. There was no dramatic shift, no screaming fights or sudden cold shoulders. In fact, it was the subtlety of it all that made it so devastating. Elijah was still sweet in all the familiar ways. He still kissed my forehead before leaving for class. Still sent texts that said things like, "Can't wait to hold you tonight." Still called me his rock when he was overwhelmed by exams. But somehow, the warmth behind those words had vanished. And once I noticed that, I began noticing everything else. It started with the way he stopped asking about my day. He'd walk in, distracted, phone still in hand, mumbling responses while scrolling through notifications. He used to listen, really listen, nodding, smiling, asking follow-ups, like my life mattered. Now he barely seemed to hear me. Then came the late nights. Thursdays were always study group, and I didn't question it at first. Med school was intense. I had seen the toll it took. But I couldn't ignore the patterns. He never came. Home before 10:30, and when he did, his shirt was wrinkle-free, his scent faintly floral, like women's perfume. I didn't accuse him. Not yet. I told myself I trusted him. But deep down, I was starting to feel like a stranger in my own home. The apartment began to reflect our emotional distance. Half-finished laundry, dishes in the sink, his side of the bed always untouched, until late into the night. Our fridge, once filled with ingredients we'd bought together, now held mostly what I picked up alone. And then there were the financial decisions. Elijah had always needed help paying for school. I'd taken pride in being able to support him. It made me feel useful, like I was building something solid for both of us. But lately, the expenses had ballooned. He mentioned applying for a research opportunity in Italy and floated the idea of a short trip before residency. Just to decompress, he said, we deserve it. Then, it was the wedding talk, a beachfront. Ceremony, over 200 guests, a drone photographer, and a custom suit from a boutique tailor in Manhattan. He spoke about these plans so casually, like the money would materialize out of nowhere. And every time I gently questioned the budget, he brushed it off with charm and optimism. We'll figure it out, he said, with that confident grin. We always do. Except there was no we figuring anything out. It was always me quietly adjusting my accounts, cutting back on small indulgences, calculating how to stretch another $5,200 for the term. I began to feel like an unpaid sponsor. In my own relationship, still I didn't leave. I loved him. Or maybe I loved the version of him I had once believed in. Either way, I stayed. Until the night I overheard him laughing in the kitchen while I stood hidden in the hallway, listening to his voice rise and fall on a phone call. Nah. She's fine. Still playing house. Got the check today. Tuition's covered. Yeah, she thinks we're going to Italy after graduation. There was a pause, then a softer chuckle. No, she's not suspicious. She's too careful for that. That's the thing about the quiet ones. They just want to be enough. My hands went numb. It took everything in me not to storm in and scream. But I didn't. I went back to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the floor for what felt like hours. When he came in later, still smelling of a cologne I'd never worn, he smiled and kissed my temple like everything was normal. I knew then I couldn't pretend anymore. But before I acted, I needed clarity, truth, evidence, something I could hold in my hands that would either justify the trust I once gave him or validate the suspicion now burning in my chest. I started small. I began taking notes. Every receipt, every story that didn't quite line up. I scrolled through our shared calendar, compared his locations to rideshare logs on my old Uber account. I noticed that on some of those Thursday nights, he had ended trips near Beacon Hill, not near Harvard's library. Once, I called him during one of those group nights. He didn't answer. When he texted later, he said he'd left his phone in his coat. But his coat had been in the living room when he walked in, his phone in hand. The inconsistencies began to compound like interest, and so did the ache in my chest. Then came the white coat ceremony. It was supposed to be a proud moment, the start of the final phase of medical school. I'd helped plan the event quietly, donating to the student committee under a pseudonym to ensure Elijah had the perfect venue with catering and lighting to match. I arrived early, dressed modestly, carrying a camera and a smile. But when I asked one of the volunteers where Elijah's family was seated, they told me there was no seat listed under my name. I stood there, stunned, watching as Elijah laughed, with his classmates, posed for pictures with his mother, hugged professors. He didn't even look for me. I ended up standing in the back of the auditorium, hidden behind a pillar, watching the man I had funded walk across a stage I had essentially built. That night, we barely spoke. He was too tired to celebrate. Said his mom wanted to take him out for dinner instead. I watched as he left, no invitation offered. Just a "thanks again, babe," and a pat on the shoulder. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the erasure. I wasn't a partner. I was a utility, a placeholder, a source. 1 week later, I canceled a job interview I had lined up for a high-level strategy role at a Boston healthcare tech firm. I'd wanted to take it, to finally step into something that matched my skills and background. But Elijah said he needed me to be around more now that residency applications were starting. He said he'd feel better knowing I was there if anything went sideways. So I stayed. Again. That same week, I found a pair of cufflinks in our drawer I didn't recognize. They were engraved with the initials MC. When I asked Elijah about them, he shrugged and said they were a gift from a classmate. Something about that moment felt scripted. His smile too perfect, his gaze too fixed. The next day, I bought a voice-activated recorder and placed it inside a book on our coffee table. And that night, I cried into my pillow for the first time in over a year, not because of what I had lost, but because of what I had finally begun to see. There are moments in a woman's life when denial is no longer a refuge. When the story you've told yourself collapses under the weight of facts you can't ignore. I was reaching that moment, inch by inch, evidence by evidence. But I wasn't ready to confront him yet. I needed to know just how deep the betrayal went. I started waking up earlier, long before Elijah. While he slept, I began accessing our shared devices, scanning through synced emails, hidden folders, draft messages never sent. It was there I found a note saved under the name MC Notes on his iCloud account. It was blank, or so I thought, until I noticed the text was white, typed invisibly into a white background. I highlighted the page. Lines and lines of planning appeared. One sentence stopped me cold. Might transition post-residency if funding. Remains unstable. Savannah's ROI is steady, but independence would be cleaner. I closed the laptop. In that moment, my heartbreak crystallized into something sharper. Not anger. Not yet. But a clarity so deep it chilled me. He was planning his exit. From me. From the life I had built with him. From the quiet, loyal woman who had given everything and asked for nothing. I stood in the bathroom that night, staring at my reflection. I didn't see a victim. I saw a woman on the brink of remembering who she really was. And I had no idea yet, just how much further he had gone. But I would find out. And when I did, I wouldn't just walk away. I would rebuild. And he would watch it all happen, without a key to follow. The night I found the journal, the city outside our window was wrapped in fog. Boston's skyline blurred beneath soft rain, and our apartment felt colder than usual, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the weight of all I had been ignoring. Elijah had fallen asleep on the couch, headphones in, half a textbook resting on his chest. He looked peaceful, defenseless even. But I no longer trusted the man who slept beside me. He had underestimated me. That was his first mistake. I had grown, up in a family that built fortunes by reading people faster than they could speak. My father used to say, "The most powerful thing in a negotiation isn't money, it's silence. Wait long enough, and everyone shows their hand." That night, I decided to play mine. I crept across the room to his desk, his sacred space, always locked, always protected. The key, I had discovered days before, was hidden under the potted aloe plant by the window. I'd seen him reach for it once, casually, when he thought I wasn't paying attention. I waited 2 weeks before I used that information. Now, with trembling fingers and a stomach like stone, I turned the key. The drawer slid open with a quiet click. No files. No study notes, no paperwork, just a black leather notebook. Small, elegant, unassuming. I held it for a moment, then walked it back to the kitchen where the light was better. Every instinct told me to brace myself. I opened to the first page. What I saw wasn't a diary, it wasn't even personal, it was data. Cold, calculated, clinical, names, dates, amounts, notes written in precise technical language like someone logging lab results. Page 1, Emily, nursing assistant. Duration, 7 months. Total support, $14,800. Transitioned out due to relocation. ROI, moderate. Page 2, Delaney, junior financial analyst. Duration, 11 months. Total support, $21,400. Became suspicious of inconsistencies. Exit initiated. Notes, burned bridge. Page 3, Savannah, hospital billing coordinator. Duration, ongoing. Total support, to date, $30,100. High consistency. Low suspicion. Strong background but unclear on extended family reach. Potential long-term ROI through residency sponsorship. I stopped breathing. My name, my job title. My generosity boiled down to a return on investment. I turned the pages faster, my heart thudding. Page 4, Jenna, waitress at Copley Brasserie. Short-term interaction. No financial support gained. Removed from rotation. Page 5, Mira, physical therapy intern. Met during rotation. Currently in evaluation phase. Personal apartment at Seaport. Potential soft transition from Savannah. The E word swam in front of me. I had never felt so humiliated, so gutted. I wasn't just being cheated on. I was being measured, tracked, replaced. I closed the book, carefully, as if it might bite me. I stood in the kitchen, fingers still curled around the leather, unable to move. The betrayal wasn't romantic. It was strategic. I wasn't a partner. I was an asset. The next morning, Elijah woke up cheerful. He kissed my shoulder, thanked me for picking up almond milk the day before, and started talking about how excited he was for his ER rotation. I said nothing. I smiled. I asked if he wanted pancakes. He said yes. Then he showered, dressed, and left, oblivious to the fact that the war had begun. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I turned everything inward and began documenting, within hours. I scanned the entire journal, uploaded the images to a hidden drive, and returned the notebook exactly where I'd found it. I needed more. I needed corroboration. Elijah was good, too good. His lies were seamless, his affection a perfected script. I needed someone who had read the same lines. I remembered the name Delaney from the journal. The last time Elijah had left his iPad unlocked, I'd seen her name in a few old texts. I started with LinkedIn. Delaney Cruz, Boston-based, financial analyst. I reached out under a fake name, just a woman doing a research project on financial abuse and relationship manipulation. She didn't respond for 3 days. Then she sent a single message. Let's talk. We met at a cafe near the Charles River late in the afternoon. She arrived wearing a crisp blazer, her dark hair in a tight bun, her eyes cautious. I didn't waste time. I'm Savannah, I said, and I think we both believed in the same lie. Her face didn't change, but something in her shoulders loosened. Elijah, she said softly. He's still at it then. I nodded. She took out her phone. I kept this. I wasn't sure why. She scrolled for a moment and handed me the screen. It was a blurry photo of a spreadsheet on a laptop. It was his, she said. I walked in on him updating it. He closed the screen so fast I barely got a look. But I'd seen my name. I recognized the numbers. I studied it. Names I didn't know. Categories like financial yield, emotional threshold, end strategy. He'd been doing this for years. He made me feel like I was his savior, Delaney said. Like he needed me to get through med school. Then he ghosted. Blocked me. When I finally saw him again, he was with someone else. I think it was you. Her voice didn't shake. She had already lived the heartbreak. Now, like me, she wanted justice. We exchanged numbers, promised to keep in touch. As we stood up to leave, she looked me in the eye and said something I'll never forget. He's not a man who falls out of love. He's a man who extracts. And when there's nothing left to take, he walks away. That night, I began digging. Deeper. I remembered Elijah's second phone, the one he'd upgraded from a few months ago, claiming it had stopped working. I had found it in a drawer, tucked under a stack of lab coats. It still powered on, no password. I felt a strange sense of pity for how arrogant he had become. The messages were still there, text threads with 6 women, sweet nothings. Promises, questions about money, about support. One name stood out, Mira, same as the journal. I read a message from just 2 weeks ago. I can't wait to move forward. Just have to finish a few obligations first. Obligations, that's what I had become. I took screenshots of everything, backed them up, created a file titled Carter Evidence Phase 1. Then I made another discovery. Elijah had a Venmo, alias. Under the name E.J. Wells, he'd been receiving payments from an account linked to someone named Zoe. Small transfers, $50, $120, $300, always labeled vaguely, support, project, tuition help. I traced her through a mutual connection on social media, a 4th-year dental student from New York. Her profile picture was with Elijah at a rooftop bar I had never been to. Each piece fit tighter into the puzzle. I no longer needed to ask if he loved me. I needed to decide what I would do with the truth. But then, something else happened. At a dinner hosted by one of Elijah's classmates, I saw her, Mira, tall, stunning, draped in a red dress that shimmered under the candlelight. She stood too close to Elijah, laughed too hard. And when I approached, Elijah introduced me not as his fiancé, but as Savannah from work. I smiled, held out my hand, and said, "Actually, I'm Savannah Reed. We've been together for 3 years." Her smile faltered. Elijah went pale. But I didn't make a scene. I turned, collected my coat, and left. It wasn't the time. The time would come soon enough. What I was building wasn't revenge. It was reckoning. I was going to take back every moment he had stolen. Not just from me, but from every woman he had reduced to a number on a spreadsheet. And when I was done, Elijah Carter would no longer be the man who walked away clean. He would be the man who was never trusted again. The day of Elijah's graduation celebration, the sun hung high and brilliant over the Boston skyline. The city pulsed with the promise of beginnings, the way it does every May, when young professionals pour into rooftop bars and hotel ballrooms, clutching diplomas and dreams. On that day, a sea of white coats, champagne flutes, and curated perfection would swirl around the man I once believed I'd marry. But the man who stood at the center of it all wasn't the Elijah Carter I had loved. He was someone else now, unmasked, unworthy, and unknowingly walking into the most delicate, devastating undoing of his life. He thought it was just another party. One he didn't plan, didn't pay for, didn't ask many questions about. He assumed, as always, that things had simply fallen into place. The truth was, the entire event, venue, lighting, catering, floral design, was funded through shell accounts belonging to Reed Global's subsidiaries. I owned the contract for every tablecloth, every rented light, every ice cube. He didn't know, of course, because men like Elijah never think to ask who's really signing the checks. Arrived late. Not by accident, but by design. I wanted the room to be full, the attention to be high, the moment to be irreversible. The venue was the rooftop ballroom of the Grand Belgrave Hotel in Back Bay. White orchids cascaded from silver vases, the string quartet hummed Vivaldi near the balcony, and waiters weaved through crowds with trays of salmon tartare and sparkling rosé. Elijah stood at the center, tailored suit hugging his frame, surrounded by classmates, mentors, and admirers. His mother, resplendent in navy chiffon, stood beside him, hand clasping his elbow like she had raised a prince. I watched them from the entrance, my heels clicking softly on the marble floor. Every step I took was a step away from the girl who once brought him coffee at 6 a.m., who whispered encouragement in the dark, who handed over tuition checks like they were wedding vows. Now, I was no longer that girl. I was Savannah Reed, and I had come to finish what he started. I didn't walk to him directly. Instead, I approached the event coordinator, one of my own, and whispered something only she would understand. Her eyes widened for a split second, then she nodded and vanished backstage. Then I turned toward Elijah. When he saw me, his smile flickered. Just slightly. Enough to register surprise, not yet panic. He took a step forward. "Savannah," he said, his voice tight with the effort of casualness. "You made it. I thought you were out of town." "I wouldn't miss this," I replied. His mother turned. Her gaze landed on me like cold steel. "I thought you had night shifts," she said flatly. "Hospital duty and all that." "I did," I answered, eyes never leaving Elijah's. But some endings are too important to miss. A hush began to settle. Around us, guests glanced at one another, uncertain whether this moment was private or performance. Elijah shifted on his feet, suddenly unsure of the stage he thought he owned. "I should find your seat," he said quickly. "We have family tables toward the front." "You didn't list me," I said gently. I checked with the staff. "I'm not on the seating chart," he blinked. "That must be—" "No mistake," I cut in. "Just a pattern." Then I stepped past him. Walked to the center of the room, where the microphone for speeches stood waiting. I could feel the energy shift as conversations fell away like leaves in a gust of wind. The pianist paused, glasses stilled midair. I took a breath, and then I spoke. "Good evening," I began. "My name is Savannah Reed. Some of you may know me as Elijah's fiancé. Others may not have known I existed at all." A ripple passed through the crowd. For the last 3 years, I supported Elijah, financially, emotionally, professionally. I believed in his future so fiercely that I paid for it myself. Tuition, rent, groceries. I even paid for this party. Funny how generosity can make you invisible, isn't it? I heard a soft gasp to my left. Someone dropped a fork. But tonight isn't about shame. It's about truth. Because the man you're celebrating isn't just a medical graduate. He's a manipulator, a strategist, a man who kept a notebook tracking the women in his life by financial output. Names, dates, totals, return on investment. I reached into my bag and held up the scanned copy of the journal. These are his words, not mine. Elijah took a step forward, panic finally blooming in his eyes. "Savannah, stop. Let's talk." I turned toward him. "No, you had your turn. This is mine." He froze. I continued. He rated us like stocks, tracked how long we'd last before we'd catch on. Delaney, Zoe, Mira, and me. I was high support potential, low suspicion, suitable for long-term investment. His words. I let the silence stretch. Then I pulled off the engagement ring he had given me. Modest, sweet, purchased with a fraction of the money I had given him. I brought this tonight because I wanted one last performance. I dropped the ring into Guy, his champagne glass. The diamond hit the crystal with a delicate chime. "Congratulations, Elijah. You've graduated. I hope the next investor reads the fine print." I stepped back, calm and unshaking, as the room swelled with whispers, disapproval, disbelief. Elijah looked like a man watching his kingdom burn and knowing he'd lit the match. I turned and walked out. I didn't run. I didn't cry. Every step I took away from that ballroom was a step back into myself. Outside, the city welcomed me in its warm spring air. My driver opened the car door. We didn't speak. As we pulled away, I looked back once, not at Elijah, but at the building, still glowing, still buzzing. And then I let it go. That night, I didn't go back to the apartment. I went home. Real. Home. The penthouse in Beacon Hill that had sat untouched for 3 years. The doorman greeted me with a polite nod. "Welcome back, Miss Reed." Inside, I opened the floor-to-ceiling windows and let the wind wash through. I poured myself a glass of wine and stood barefoot on the marble floor, watching the city twinkle below. The woman Elijah tried to erase had returned, and I wasn't finished. What happened next would be quiet, precise, professional. I didn't want tabloid headlines or petty drama. I wanted impact. 3 days later, I met with a lawyer, Tasha Ellison, an expert in financial manipulation and coercive fraud. I gave her everything: the journal, the photos, the Venmo transactions, the messages from other women. She read in silence, then looked up and said, "He didn't just lie. He built a business model." We filed a formal complaint with the residency board. Then I made a second move. I traced his mother's real estate affiliations. Turns out, her firm had exclusive rights to several luxury listings through Reed Global Partnerships. A single phone call severed those ties. She wouldn't know why. But she'd feel the loss as, for Elijah, his name quietly disappeared from the Harvard residency list. Officially, failure to meet ethical review standards. No scandal, no press. Just a quiet disqualification. The kind that follows a person forever in a profession. Built on trust, I didn't respond to his texts. Not the ones that pleaded. Not the ones that threatened. Not even the one that said, "You've ruined everything." Because the truth was, I hadn't ruined anything. I'd simply returned what was never his to keep. In the next chapter, he'll learn what happens when the person you thought you controlled turns out to be the one who writes your legacy. And me? I was just getting started. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's quiet. It walks into a room without fanfare, dressed in confidence instead of revenge. And when it speaks, people listen. Not because they're afraid, but because they sense the shift in the air. That's the kind of power I had begun to understand. Not the power Elijah once thought he had over me, but the kind that's earned by walking through fire and refusing to let it scar you permanently. 3 months after Elijah's graduation party, the one that marked both the highest point in his career and the lowest moment of his exposure, I stood inside the glass-walled boardroom of the Langston Medical Foundation in D.C., surrounded by a network of healthcare leaders, ethics advisors, and representatives from the National Residency Accreditation Board. They weren't here to talk about Elijah Carter. They were here to talk about the future of ethical investment in medical residency programs. And they had invited me to speak. What none of them knew, at least not in detail, was how I had arrived here. They didn't know about the quiet unraveling of a 3-year relationship I had poured my soul into. They didn't know I'd once counted every dollar in secret just to make someone else's dream come true. What they saw now was a woman in control. But beneath the tailored suit and calm exterior was someone who had rebuilt her identity piece by piece with the steadiness of a surgeon and the resolve of a survivor. After Elijah's removal from the residency shortlist, word began to spread. Not through scandal sheets or social media, but through the one place that mattered more, Internal professional circles. People in medicine talk. They notice who doesn't get the call back, who disappears from preceptor lists, who never returns to rotations. Elijah's name became an open question in some rooms and a closed subject in others. But no one openly defended him. My legal team, led by Tasha Ellison, had pursued action on behalf of myself, Delaney, Mira, and 2 other women we identified through financial trails Elijah had left behind. We weren't interested in headlines. We wanted precedent. And we got it. A civil case settlement that recognized coercive financial manipulation as a pattern of predatory behavior in professional development contexts. It didn't just compensate us. It forced the review board to revise its internal policies on ethical character evaluation for residency applicants. Quietly, a ripple became a shift. But I didn't stop there. I knew Elijah's mother, Margaret Carter, had built much of her own reputation on exclusive real estate dealings with high-net-worth medical families. What she hadn't expected was for those families to start pulling out one by one, citing new compliance directions. Langston Global, which had quietly controlled 1/3 of the listings she relied on, terminated all co-representation. She called twice, left voicemails. I never answered, because what she had lost was not business. It was the illusion of control. And when it came to the illusion of control, no one had played it more dangerously than Elijah. The last time I saw him was at the annual Harvard Alumni Gala in October. I had been invited as a speaker, now formally holding the role of Chief Strategy Officer for the Reed Global Foundation, focused on ethical healthcare investment. I arrived alone, dressed in a deep emerald gown, understated but sharp. The kind of look that didn't ask for attention but received it anyway. He was near the back of the room, standing beside a man I recognized as a community clinic coordinator. His suit was ill-fitting, his posture tired. His name badge had no institution beneath it, just independent practitioner. When he saw me, his face changed. Not to anger, not to regret, but to disbelief. The kind of disbelief only people who think they've gotten away with everything ever feel when they realize the story didn't end where they thought it did. I didn't approach him. I didn't need to. I gave my speech 15 minutes later, standing beneath a glass chandelier, with my name projected on a screen behind me. I used to believe that the best kind of support was silent, I said, my voice steady. That if you stood quietly behind someone and gave them everything you had, they'd see you. They'd choose you. But what I've learned is that real support doesn't mean shrinking. It doesn't mean disappearing to make room for someone else's success. The best kind of support is the kind that begins with integrity. And that starts with how we invest in ourselves. There was applause. But more than that, there was recognition. I wasn't speaking just about medicine. I was speaking about how easily women, especially capable giving women, are reduced to stepping stones for someone else's ambition, and how dangerous that becomes when no one is watching. After the event, a senior advisor from the National Ethics Consortium pulled me aside. "We'd like you to serve on our 2026 residency candidate review panel," she said. "You have insight most of us never hear in time." I nodded. I'd be honored. When I left the ballroom, I caught a final glimpse of Elijah, standing by the coat check alone. No one beside him, no hand to hold, no applause waiting. Just a man surrounded by everything he once thought he deserved, now watching it belong to someone else. Me. The following month, the Reed Foundation launched a new initiative, a private grant for women pursuing advanced degrees who had experienced coercive financial relationships. The fund was small to start, but its message was clear. Women's ambition is not collateral, and love should never be a transaction. We named it the Ledger Project, because sometimes what nearly breaks you becomes the framework for something unshakable. I often think about who I was before Elijah, before the notebook, before the unraveling. I remember the quiet girl who believed that sacrifice was the language of loyalty. I don't hate her. I honor her. She was kind. She was generous. But she was wrong. Because real loyalty doesn't ask you to erase yourself. It asks you to stay true to your instincts, your dignity, your worth. Today, I don't bring lunch in reused containers or slip tuition checks into someone else's books. I sit at tables where my name is already on the list, where my presence is not questioned, where my voice is invited, not because of who I supported, but because of who I've become. I am Savannah Reed. I don't wait to be seen anymore. And if you've ever felt invisible, used, betrayed, you don't have to wait either. Your value doesn't come from what you give, it comes from what you protect. Let that be your legacy, because I've found mine. Savannah Reed's story began not with betrayal, but with belief. A deep, wholehearted belief that love, when nurtured selflessly, would grow into something unshakable. She was a woman who had everything by society's standards: wealth, legacy, opportunity, but chose to strip herself of it all to test something more fragile: the integrity of a man's love. She hid her last name, her resources, and the world she came from, hoping to discover if Elijah Carter would love her not for what she had, but for who she was. For 3 years, she played the quiet supporter, the invisible backbone of a dream that wasn't even hers. She paid his tuition, covered his expenses, sacrificed her own growth, and never once asked for recognition. But what she received in return was not love. It was exploitation. Elijah didn't just lie to her. He built a system around her. A network of manipulation masked as charm, designed to extract resources from women under the guise of intimacy and partnership. He kept a literal ledger of their names, their financial contributions, and his exit strategies. Cold calculations where Savannah was merely one data point in a portfolio of deception. And yet she didn't fall apart. Savannah didn't scream or beg. She didn't seek revenge by fire or fury. Instead, she stood in her pain, studied it, learned from it, and then turned it into power. She exposed the truth with grace, confronted Elijah without theatrics, and let facts speak where words would have trembled. She stripped him of his illusions the same way he had tried to strip her of her worth, and she did it without ever needing to become cruel herself. What followed wasn't just the fall of a man, it was the rise of a woman who remembered who she was. Savannah reclaimed her identity, stepped back into her rightful place, and began rewriting the narrative, not just for herself, but for every woman who's ever been made to feel small in the name of love. She joined national ethics boards, launched initiatives to protect future victims, and gave voice to a form of financial abuse that often goes unnoticed because it hides behind affection. Her story is not just about betrayal, it's about awakening. It's about what happens when a woman who's been used stops waiting to be chosen and starts choosing herself. And perhaps the most powerful part: she never needed Elijah to fall in order to rise. He fell because of his own choices. She rose because of hers. The lesson we take away. Savannah's journey reminds us that real love cannot be proven through sacrifice alone, especially not one-sided sacrifice. When you find yourself giving and giving, yet being dismissed, devalued, or erased, it's not love you're nurturing. It's a power imbalance. And it's not your job to shrink just to be accepted. The lesson here is twofold. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it often is. Silence doesn't mean safety, and doubts are not weaknesses. They're signals. Know your worth, in love, in friendship, in every area of life. You should never have to hide who you are, minimize your power, or give endlessly in hopes of being enough. The right people will never ask you to dim your light just to feel secure in theirs. How to apply this? Today, In your relationships, ask yourself, are you being seen or are you being used? Are your efforts appreciated or just expected? Do you feel safe to grow? Or are you constantly stepping around someone else's ego? Start setting boundaries, not walls, but standards. Value your emotional labor, your time, and your energy as deeply as you value someone else's dreams. And most importantly, remember that walking away from what hurts you is not weakness. It's wisdom. Because like Savannah, you can rebuild. And when you do, you'll realize you were never the one lacking. You were the one who loved hardest. Now, a question for you. If you discovered your partner was using your love and support purely for personal gain, what would you do? A. Forgive and try to fix it privately. B. Expose the truth and walk away to protect your dignity. Comment below with your answer, A or B, and tell us why. Let's open up the conversation. What do you think of Savannah's story? Have you ever known someone who went through something similar? Do you believe in testing love the way she did? Or do you think transparency should always come first? Share your thoughts in the comments so we can all learn from each other. And if this story moved you, inspired you, or made you reflect on your own journey, please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep telling the stories that matter. Stories that challenge, empower, and remind us of what we deserve. We'll be back soon with another unforgettable journey. Until then, take care of your heart. And never let anyone make you feel like a footnote in your own life.